This is Carly Smock with Wade Hall with the Linton-Stockton Student Press, and we're here with
Josh Corbeil with the Indiana Pacers.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Okay, Mr. Corbeil, what inspired you to become an athletic trainer?
I was an athlete in high school, and I was not good enough to make that my career. So I figured this was a good way for me to be involved in sports, and I liked helping people.
Okay, what was your first job as an athletic trainer?
My first job as an athletic trainer, well, I'm a physical therapist as well as an athletic trainer, so I worked as a physical therapist at a clinic with regular people that get hurt. And then when I became an athletic trainer, my first job was actually working with a women's professional fast-pitch softball team in Lowell, Massachusetts.
Mr. Corbeil, what makes a successful athletic trainer?
Someone who doesn't have a social life, because it requires a lot of long hours, late nights, early mornings, travel, things like that. But I think, in all seriousness, there's a lot of important decisions that have to be made as far as what's best for the players on your team, but also time management, because there's more that goes into it than just the healthcare part. When you're an athletic trainer, you're in charge of all of the logistics for your team, so scheduling practices and travel and ordering equipment, and there's different responsibilities for people that work in different settings, but there's a lot more that goes into it than just that. So being able to manage your time, both within your job and then within your life, is a huge part.
And also, Mr. Corbeil, what are some challenges with athletic training?
The biggest challenge is the time, being away from your family. At our level, we have other challenges because of all the number of eyes on us. You know, when a player gets hurt, it's my fault until they get back, and constant questions from agents and family and team and things like that. So, the microscope that you're under a little bit. But personally, the hardest part is just it's not a normal 9-to-5 job. You know, we travel a lot, we miss birthdays and holidays, so that's definitely the hardest part.
Mr. Corbeil, why did you choose to go to the Indiana Pacers?
Who wouldn't? I was an intern with the Boston Celtics, and I was there for 3 years. And when I got my license, and it was time for me to get a real job, I had a couple different offers from different NBA teams. But once I met with the management group here with Larry Bird and Donnie Walsh, it's a really well-run organization that makes everyone feel very valued, and that was important, especially in comparing it to some of the other places that I went. It was just a place that was very welcoming, and I could see myself here for a long time.
Your training team has been called the best in the league. What do you think separates yours from the others?
That was not a question I was expecting. Our staff, myself and Carl Eaton, who is our associate head athletic trainer, we're both physical therapists as well as athletic trainers, which is a lot more schooling, an extra degree, and it prepares you to kind of handle all aspects of people's health care. Athletic trainers typically that side of the training is the first responder. When someone gets hurt and you go out on the court and tend to their injury. And there's a lot of focus on prevention, taping and bracing and things like that. The physical therapy background is more on the rehab side. When someone is hurt, how do you make sure they're fully healthy before they come back? There's a lot more education in that. And as well as better understanding, more in-depth understanding of how the body works to try to prevent some of these injuries that are preventable. So by having a staff that has both credentials, we're able to come at it from different points of view. And we also have Sean Windle's our strength and conditioning coach. He's been with us this is his 12th year as well. And he is our strength coach, but he's actually also an athletic trainer. So to have a strength coach that has a medical training, he's able to complete the circle for us. We don't have to be walking injured guys through all of their exercises because he can kind of manage that part for us. So we kind of have a complete team because of all the training that we've brought into our staff.
Mr. Corbeil, what is an athletic trainer's worst fear?
The devastating injury. The player that dies or has some catastrophic injury like a spinal cord injury or a head injury. You don't want to be you're fortunate if you're there when someone needs you for that, but you never want to witness that. That's by far the biggest fear.
And also, what is the worst injury you have encountered?
To a player, I think the worst one was probably Paul George's broken leg. I wasn't actually there for that because that was with Team USA. So I flew out a couple days later and saw him. That one sort of looked the worst, but we actually kind of got lucky that he broke right in the middle of his bone and didn't involve any joints, so he was able to come back and still play at a high level. But outside of that, that's the worst player injury. But the worst thing that me and my staff have been a part of here was we've had a couple different people have heart attacks that we had to perform CPR, and that's by far worse than a broken leg.
Mr. Corbeil, what is the process you have to go through when a player gets injured?
The initial steps are assessing them on the court, bringing them to the bench, and initially we want to know, is this something that is going to prevent them from returning to the game? You know, a lot of times a guy will get hurt and we'll look at it and decide that there's no additional risk and he feels like he can play, and we let him back out there. If he's not able to play, then it's meeting with the doctors and determining if we need to do any additional testing, so x-rays, MRIs, or any other type of medical test that would be appropriate. And then usually within the first couple of days, you get a better sense for how severe is it and how quickly is this going to turn around. And then there's a lot of communication with the player, educating them of what their injury is and what the process is going to be, whether it's short-term or long-term. And then educating everyone else involved, which is the coaching staff, management staff, sometimes the player agents, sometimes family, so that everyone involved that's affected by it has an understanding of what this process is going to be about.
Okay. Have you ever had to take care of an opponent?
Not directly, no. As the home team, like last night we had a home game here, and the visiting team always has their own staff, so we've never directly had to treat anybody, but we've had to assist. You know, if there's a big injury and they need an ambulance or they need an x-ray or things like that, my staff will assist with that, but we won't be the direct caregivers.
And as being a basketball athletic trainer, what are some differences between being a basketball athletic trainer than other sports?
That's a really good question, because I actually get that a lot. So there are a lot of opportunities where students that are thinking about going into this profession will come and want to talk to us, and that's one of the things that they'll ask. And for students that are interested in getting into the profession, the first thing I tell everybody is make sure you go work in football. Because in football you see everything. You see traumas that, knock on wood, we would rarely, if ever, see in basketball. A lot of our injuries are more soreness, overuse, repetitive trauma type things. Your knee tendinitises, your muscle strains, your sore lower backs, things like that. Luckily, knock on wood again, we don't get the big broken bones and things very often that football gets on a nightly basis. Every sport, because every sport has a unique movement to it, those players in each sport tend to develop their own set of issues. Whether in pitchers in baseball it's sore arms and shoulders and elbows, our guys don't get that unless it's some sort of trauma. So whatever sport you go into, they have their own set of issues that are unique to that sport just because of the movements required to do it. With us, it's knees, a lot of ankle sprains, foot problems, backs, and muscle strains. Most of ours are from the waist down. Occasionally you'll have something in the upper extremity or the head, but those are usually traumatic.
And also, Mr. Corbeil, as coaches come and go, do you have to make any changes with how you athletic train?
Yeah, the coach is a huge part of what we do because the coach doesn't have impact on directly the care that we give to the players, but how we make decisions on when a player comes back and what's appropriate for them to do on the court, the coach has a big role in that because of what they perceive that player's role to be. For example, if we have a player that is going to be a starter and play 40 minutes a game, our decision making for when we put that player back into a game is different than a guy who is a bench player that would maybe play 10 minutes a game. That 10-minute-a-game guy can come back much sooner because the demands on him are lower. So that's one way. But outside of that, we talked earlier about the logistics that go into outside of the medical aspect of my job. And I have a new coach checklist that I've come up with over the years, and it's like 30-something questions that I have to sit down with any new coach and just ask them what their preferences are. Things like, what time do you want to practice? Do you believe in morning shoot-arounds or afternoon shoot-arounds? What information do you want me telling you during a game? Because part of my job is to keep track of fouls and timeouts and what's coming and help him manage a game. And every coach likes to get that information a little bit differently. So there's a million little things like that over the years I've just had to put a checklist together to ask new coaches. So they do have a big impact on it, but the bottom line, when it comes to medical decision making, that doesn't really change coach to coach.
Mr. Corbeil, we read that you attended school in Boston. Why did you choose to go to Boston University?
I'm from the Boston area, and when I was in high school, I played 3 sports, and I got hurt playing football. And that was when I first went to a physical therapist and started to figure out that, I think this might be my way to work in sports as a career. So I started asking everybody I could find, how do I achieve this? How do I get to be a sports medicine professional in pro sports? And it seemed to me like everybody I was talking to at the time, the recommendation was the physical therapy program at Boston University. They had a really strong orthopedic sports medicine staff. That was their focus. So I decided that's where I was going. It was fairly close to home, and I got a partial scholarship. So that helped make the decision as well. And that's actually how I ended up getting with the Celtics, was through them. There was a connection there, so it clearly was the right decision. But I was local.
What are some differences in working with professional and college athletes?
Yeah, there are definitely differences with that. When you're in college, athletes are working towards the goal of getting to professional sports for the most part. A lot of them know they're never going to reach that, but they're not being paid. In the NBA, the players' contracts are guaranteed before they get here. So part of the challenge in building a team, which has nothing to do with me, this is the people above me, but it trickles down to me, is that trying to choose players that their motivation for playing is the right motivation. Players that play because they love playing and want to play versus they're playing just for the money. Because that impacts how they prepare and how they get back out on the court. Because when a player signs a contract for several years, if he's hurt for those 3 or 4 years, he gets paid the whole time. So the drive to get back out there is not there across the board, although most guys really truly do love to play, so it's not as big an issue as a lot of people would think it is, but it's definitely a variable that plays in to contracts. If a player's contract is going to end soon, sometimes some players will be more motivated by that to go play well to get their next contract, and other players will be much more cautious because they don't want to get injured right as their contract ends. So they'll be less likely to play with small injuries. So it's knowing the personalities of the players and what motivates them really has a big impact on us doing our job. In college, they're there because they just want to play. So the money is clearly the biggest difference between the two, and the level of competition. At our level versus college, the players are bigger, stronger, faster, more talented. So the collisions are harder, the trauma is more, the game is just faster. So a lot of differences. Good question.
Mr. Corbeil, you said you interned for the Celtics. What are some differences between the Celtics and the Pacers?
From a organizational standpoint or from a training staff standpoint?
Probably both, actually.
Okay. Well, Boston is a huge market with a lot of history. We have a lot of history here too, but it's a much smaller market, which means in Boston there's a lot more media scrutiny, a lot more public talk, a lot more national exposure. So the pressure there is even greater than it is here. We run our staffs very differently. I learned a lot from Ed Lessert, who's been the trainer there for going on 30 years now. He was actually the trainer for the Dream Team in '92, the Olympic team that Larry Bird and Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson played on. So he's been there forever, and he's the reason I'm here. So I learned a ton from him. But our approaches are different. So the kind of the way we run our training rooms is different. We take a more regimented, scheduled approach. We give our players appointments every day, like a doctor's office would, and they're less structured in the way they do it. But it's worked for him for 30 years, so there's no right or wrong. It's just kind of different the way we do it. There's definitely a family atmosphere here, being Indiana, and everyone in our organization knows everybody top to bottom. In Boston, it's such a big organization. It's a very well-run organization, but there's just a different feel to it. It's that big city environment.
And also, since this is your 10/11th year being with the Pacers, what are some moments that have stuck out to you?
This is actually my 13th year with the Pacers. Yes. The moments that stand out were my first year with Reggie. The brawl in Detroit was my 10th game. They don't like us to talk about that, but that was one that stands out. And then being that Reggie's last playoff run was a big one. And then beyond that, it was seeing Paul develop into a superstar has been amazing. But my favorite time that I've been here were the back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals series against Miami. There is no feeling like that, so I hope we get back there.
This has been Wade Hall and Carly Smock with Linton-Stockton Student Press, and we'd like to thank Josh Corbeil for talking to us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Good. You guys did a great job.